All right. Hello, Gates Millennium Scholars. This is your Senior Relationship Manager, Melissa Jordan, over at headquarters. Please excuse our tardiness. We were having a bit of technical difficulties, but we're going to go ahead and get started quickly with our panel. As many of you know, this month our focus for our webinar Wednesdays is opportunities. And tonight we're going to talk about opportunities in the field of higher education. And some of you may be wondering, what do you mean when you say higher education? What does that involve? Or I've kind of heard about it, or I have a student leadership opportunity and this sounds familiar. And so at the end of our webinar tonight, you will have a plethora of information regarding how you can get into the field. We'll try to answer any questions that you might have about the field or a career in the field. And you'll meet some really awesome professionals who are eager to talk with you. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, and I will pass it over to Will, who will start off our brief introductions, and then I'll pose our first question to the panel. Will?
Alrighty, thank you so very much, Melissa, for that introduction. Good evening, Gates Millennium Scholars. My name is Wilman A. Krishna III. I work here at the University of Pennsylvania in the Center for the Study of Race and Equity in Education as the Director of Administration and also the Associate Director of Project RISE, which stands for Research Evaluation Strategies and Evaluation for Boys and Men of Color. So just a quick background about me. I did my undergrad at Hampton University, graduated in 2006, went to work in corporate America for a couple of years, then ultimately, came to a point in my life where I felt that I wanted something a little bit more meaningful in my career path. I had some really good friends, introduced me to some higher ed opportunities and also a higher ed master's program. I went to Penn State University where I did my master's in college student affairs, and that's pretty much how I found my pathway into higher education.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Edward Smith. I'm a second-year PhD student at the Graduate School of Education at the University of Pennsylvania. I'm focusing on higher education, and I'm glad to be with you all this evening.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kendrick Davis. I am a first-year PhD student at the Graduate School of Education at the University of Pennsylvania. My research focuses in higher education and the intersection with science, technology, engineering, and math, or STEM. I'm also a research associate at the Center for the Study of Race and Equity in Education.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mercedes Terrazas, and I'm a master's student here at the University of Pennsylvania in the Graduate School of Education. And before coming to Penn, I received my bachelor's degree from DePaul University in Chicago, and my research interests are in access and equity in higher education.
Fabulous. Okay, so we're going to start with the first question, which Will, you kind of hinted to. But if folks could talk about how they found their career paths in higher education, how did they even find out about this field?
Yeah, I mean, I can expound a little bit more. So in the intro, I kind of talked about how I found my way into higher education. So again, back in 2006, graduated, and I made a career for myself working for Bank of America in customer service and sales. And during that time, it was, I guess, the financial downturn when a lot of things were going on. So I was just kind of questioning, what my career long term would look like. I wanted something more meaningful because I was doing a lot of sales and a lot of customer service, and those interactions seemed a bit superficial because of everything going on during that time period. So it was ultimately led me to a place of kind of thinking about, man, I want something for myself that is a little bit more engaging. I want something where I can feel that my impact, where I can feel that my impact is made a little bit more readily, I guess. So, during that time, had some really good friends talk with me and talk and kind of fleshing things out in terms of my career. And one of my friends was finishing his master's program at Penn State, the other one finishing her master's program in psychology. So we were kind of like chatting, and they suggested some opportunities for me, some higher ed opportunities, an internship at Princeton with the W.B. Du Bois Scholars Institute, and then the master's program at Penn State. Looked into those opportunities, and those opportunities really happened to be a really, really good fit. They made an impact on me in terms of, I've really found out that I liked working with students and really liked them, seeing them achieve or work towards educational goals. So, I ended up applying to a couple of master's programs, and went to Penn State and had a fantastic time there in terms of learning the ins and outs of college student affairs and also higher education, and that got me started on my path in higher ed.
I'll follow up after Wilman, as my story is very similar to his. I started out straight from undergrad working in financial services in New York. I had a bachelor's degree in economics and thought that my intellectual interest and my experience during undergrad would be a nice fit there. However, within a year, I found that my personal interests and kind of philosophical interests did not necessarily fit in the financial services and Wall Street environment. And I found that a lot of the goals that the organization had contended with some of the goals and values that I had, and some of the ideas that I wanted to see manifest in the world.
Uh-oh, Edward, we can't hear you. Something's going on with your sound. You seem to have faded out. We could hear you at one point, but then it literally like kind of just faded out.
And if your laptop is on your lap, you might be inadvertently covering the microphone.
Okay, how about now?
Yes, that's perfect. Continue.
Okay, so I'll start over. Like Wilman, I started working in financial services straight from undergrad. I had a bachelor's degree in economics, and I thought that the professional environment would be a nice fit for me to deploy some of the things that I learned in school and some of the experiences I had in undergrad. But within a year, I found that the goals and objectives of the organization really contended with some of the values that I had upheld at the time, and some of the ideas and concepts I wanted to see manifest in the world, and really didn't see myself lasting in that environment. Thus, I sought the advice of some mentors that I had throughout my undergrad experience, and some of the advice from counselors that focused on helping people kind of tap into their purpose and tap into kind of their professional expertise. Thus, that led me to seeking out more information about careers in higher education and careers that would position me to help advance the development and learning of college students. Thus, I found myself at a Master's of College Student Affairs program at Penn State University, and that experience really allowed me to go further into the field of higher education and develop some really strong skills and competencies that I think both advanced me as a professional and as a person, but also helped me engage in a movement to strengthen advance kind of educational opportunity and broaden access to education opportunity in higher education for groups that have historically been underserved by traditional systems of higher education. So I guess I'll stop there. But very similarly to Will, we both made very sharp career transitions, and for the better, we think.
Excellent. Thanks, Edward. We have two other panelists. Either of you can feel free to jump in with your answers of how you found the career in higher education.
So I think I had sort of a non-traditional path. So I did my undergrad and graduate degrees in engineering, but always had sort of a passion for education and STEM education more specifically. So although my academic training was in engineering, all of my all of my professional experience was in the field of education, and it was one of the areas I identified very early on as lacking, um, really lacking enough focus, and lacking enough resources to help, um, not just underserved students, but just students in general, get to the place where they could be successful in the K-12 space and the higher ed space in STEM. And so that led me to work in the school district, where I really had the opportunity to work on like large-scale district-wide projects, um, on like increasing access and opportunity for STEM across the district. And then I eventually started doing STEM work at the mayor's office at a citywide level. And one of the things that I realized was that in order to effectively, in order to effectively sort of strengthen the K-12 pipeline, we really had to start thinking about how we also increase the pipeline and access into higher education, because getting students through K-12 in STEM and science wasn't going to serve the sort of like workforce needs of, wasn't going to sort of serve the national and global workforce needs. And so that kind of pushed me toward the higher education side of things, to really talk about how we strengthen and how institutions can be supportive of building up the STEM workforce of the future, really.
And for me, I felt that conducting a lot of research in my undergraduate career, it had really led me to not only think about psychology but also education as a way to diversify academia, and also allowed a lot of underserved youth attend higher education. So for me, it was in terms of my research interests also, which was have always been access and equity. And so what I decided to do is just talk to different faculty and my mentors to see what would be a good pathway for me to go and explore my research and continue my education. So then I ended up deciding that higher education would be the best route for me.
Uh-oh. Okay, so the next question is, how would a student know if the field of higher education is a good fit for them? What are some indicators? And that's whomever wants to respond. How can a student tell if higher education is a path that they should even explore?
Well, I think I think that I think maybe the common thing that brings together, um, my colleagues and myself and a lot of other folks that I have, met or in the field of higher education, that have kind of found their way into higher education in terms of it being a good fit for them. I think there's just a natural curiosity, curiosity about either how you were educated or want to see people, or curious about how you as a person were educated, or curious about people being educated and what that looks like. There are many different facets with that. I would say, one, surefire or telltale sign, if you're trying to think about if higher ed is a good fit for you, is just, are you, generally curious about, college and what people going to college and what people do in college looks like, and are you curious about the various things that go on in college? I'd say if you're curious about some of those different things, then that would be one of many ways to figure out if higher ed would be a good fit for you.
I'll just jump in. I think that part of what sort of influences someone's decision to go into higher education has a lot to do with how they experienced higher education. And so if you find yourself in a classroom setting, or you find yourself in your campus, and for example, you don't see students that look like you in certain spaces, or you feel like there are certain injustices or inconsistencies in certain majors, or a presence of certain genders or ethnicities, then I think that higher education could be a field for you, because then you can be a part of the process, and you can be on the front lines of increasing the presence of those populations on campus. So if you feel like there should be more women in STEM, right? That's a challenge that you could tackle, or challenges you could take on in a higher education space. I think it's sometimes difficult to see yourself in higher education, because it's this sort of like nebulous, I don't know what that means, I don't know what people do, but sort of just echoing what I said about how you experience higher education has a lot to do with what you feel like you can bring to the table. And so taking on some of those challenges that you saw during your undergraduate experience are the same challenges that you could take on as a higher ed researcher or a higher ed practitioner.
So that's a good segue. A lot of what everyone has been talking about seems to me that folks are preparing maybe for the professoriate or to be a faculty member. And I know that I found my way into higher education. It was a fluke, really. I had no idea that higher education existed. I was one of those seniors that didn't have a plan after graduation and just so happened to be offered a position working in a housing department. And so I was on the administrative side, or kind of the side that practices the theory that the researchers research. And so could anyone talk about kind of that difference between whether a student may be interested in going into a faculty role and being in a traditional classroom setting, or just focusing more on like teaching and researching, in comparison to an administrative practitioner role, which might look a little bit different if you are working in student affairs or student life or college administration? Could someone speak to those two different roles and how students can kind of maneuver between the two of them?
Well, I'll start, and I'll just say briefly that oftentimes it doesn't necessarily have to, and it being the choice, be positioned as a dichotomy, right? So, as a practitioner, I think for sure it would help if you're comfortable listening and speaking to people and engaging in discussions about how a student's learning and development, or a college's teaching and educational delivery is facilitated, and the connection between the resources and the supports you have to bring as a professional or a practitioner representing an organization, and the needs and interests and aspirations of the student, right? So if you could find yourself in that intersection, I think that positions you well in practice, right? And perhaps if you don't mind the isolation of thinking, performing scientific inquiry and scientific broadly, right? Inquiry about theory and research and synthesizing kind of large bodies of literature in many times isolating circumstances, then that probably positions you well for a research career, right? And research whether in academia or at a nonprofit or at a research institute or for some type of governmental agency. But I want to come back to the intersections and perhaps make the argument that as practitioners, you know, it could be argued that one to do your job well should always be thinking about inquiry and inquiry as a research performance in order to kind of understand how you can better do your job or maximize the performance of your organization, and in this case, meeting the needs of students, right? So, you know, performing observations, talking to students, talking to other practitioners about their experiences and how they address challenges or, you know, understand the conditions under which they work, so that you can synthesize and make meaning of your particular role in and amongst your organizations and with the students with whom you interact. And I think as researchers, for sure, you know, broadening, you know, stepping away from that iterative kind of process of performing you know, the investigation of questions or being in isolation as you you know, analyze and think about the data that you've gleaned, whether words on a page, whether answers to a question, or whether formulas, models, and numbers, right? And stepping away from that and asking students about, you know, some of the things you hypothesize to be true or to be false, or, you know, some of the things you found in the literature. So, you know, whether you find yourself as thinking about research or practice, I would certainly advocate for blending both worlds to kind of maximize your performance as in either one or the other domain.
And in regards to that, I want to say that I agree. Like, you could definitely blend like the research aspect and also being a practitioner, or you could decide what works for you or what you want to actually do once you go through the actual graduate program. So it could be like a master's degree or a PhD, depending on what you would like to do. But in regards to, you could not only conduct research and also utilize that research to be a practitioner. So you could definitely do both at the same time. But like I said, it's something that you would find out depending on your pathway and what actually is interesting to you. So you could, like I said, you could be a faculty and conduct research, or you could be like an administrator and be an actual practitioner. So it really depends. But you could definitely blend both.
Could someone speak to kind of the master's level, like the graduate school experience? If we have undergrad students who are considering the field of higher education, what can they expect once they are in the program? What is that experience like?
I think one thing that's common to all master's programs in higher ed is there's a lot of reading. So higher education, the field of higher education is interdisciplinary. So it mainly pulls from disciplines such as psychology, sociology, sometimes public policy, but different areas in the social sciences, you know, comprise, you know, the higher education canon, right? So I would say that, you know, being able to ingest the literature and also make meaning of the literature is, you know, one of the things that is common in higher education programs. There's just, you know, you know, the amount of literature or the amount of articles concerning, you know, different phenomena in higher education is pretty voluminous. But, you know, being able to extract, you know, what's important from that literature and being able to offer that in class discussions or use that in papers is something that's common to, I think, master's level work. Some classes, in terms of class styles, there are some classes where it is more discussion based, and being able to critique arguments, come up with an original argument. Yeah, so those are some things. I'll also let my colleagues chime in and talk about what a master's experience looks like as well.
In terms of like the master's experience, I would say definitely writing is a big component. Not only being able to read the literature, you also need to formulate arguments and have those arguments be backed up by evidence and be supported by different theory and framework that you will actually see in the readings that you have. So then utilizing that to write arguments, actually doing a lot of writing throughout the course, throughout the courses, that definitely is going to be a big component. And managing your time based on all the classes and like writing and trying to find your own style of studying, because just like I said, like there's going to be a lot of writing, a lot of reading in different classes. So managing like what is important from all the reading and how that matters to you is really important.
And I want to just piggyback off of what Mercedes said really quickly. Like her and Will stressed like the reading and writing aspects was really important, but I also want to touch on sort of like the forward-thinking nature that needs to go into your plans for your master's program and beyond. And so a lot of master's programs are very fast-paced. You might have a 9-month program or one that's like a year and a half. And so if you're considering then going on from your master's to your doctorate, then you need to also be considering what research experiences and opportunities can you take advantage of in your master's program, sort of, not just taking time for classes and coursework, but also, building some meaningful relationships with faculty and other administrators on the campus, and not just going through the coursework, but using these individuals as mentors to help you try to figure out sort of next steps, whether you're going into the professoriate or whether you're going to administration. So because it's such a fast-paced environment, you need to, obviously be concerned about the more immediate coursework and tests and things like that, but also be forward-thinking enough to to utilize your available resources to set you up for the best success in the future.
So can we talk about, and these questions could have been answered or could have been posed in a separate order, but can we talk a little bit about how one goes about finding a program in higher education, whether that's master's and PhD, and those two processes may be different if you're looking at a master's degree versus a PhD degree, but how does a student go about assessing and finding a program that best fits, and how do they prepare themselves for that process?
So I think one thing, so a couple of different strategies that I use to prepare for and also look at master's programs. I definitely use the advice of peers, right? So I had one of my really good friends, my best friend actually, was a person who turned me on to a graduate program at Penn State, but I used a couple of different resources. I know at one point I was using the U.S. News World Rankings for master's programs. So I used that to kind of like think about these are the master's programs. I knew that I wanted to apply to top 10 master's programs, but I think for me, what really kind of shifted the way and hone in on what graduate programs would be the best fit for me was I began to look at, and think about what did I want in my master's experience. And so for me, what it boiled down to was two main things: the kind of curriculum of the program, and also the faculty, what work had the faculty done who were teaching in the program at these particular universities, and what did the curriculum there look like. And so for me, when I was going through my master, looking at master's programs, Penn State just really rose to the top in terms of who they had teaching there, and also the curriculum. It was very intentional. Particularly for me, one of my research interests is around students of color in higher education. So my master's program at Penn State had a social justice bent to it, so social justice conversations, and that framework was weaved throughout most, if not all, of the classes that I took. So that was important for me. So, looking at those little nuances like, curriculum, faculty may help to influence a student's decision in terms of what programs they would choose. But in terms of preparing, obviously there's the GRE, which is the graduate record examination that every every graduate program, master's level graduate program requires. There's also the personal statement, so preparing for those pieces, getting advice on your personal statement. You'll probably have to do several iterations of that, studying for the GRE, networking. I also networked. I thought, like some of my colleagues said, it's always good to build a network and kind of get information in terms of figuring out how to navigate applying to graduate school.
Does anyone want to share, for students that are interested in a graduate degree in the field, what about paying for it? Like, what are the funding opportunities? How does one go about finding those or uncovering those? If someone could speak to that, that would be great.
So I'll jump in really quickly, and I'm going to make some reasonable generalizations, but I want to sort of preface it with, this is from my experience, and every program in every school is not created equal. But I will say that it's probably, so I want to first start by saying that you don't have to get a master's degree in higher education in order to go directly into a doctoral degree in higher education. So there are programs that will allow you to apply straight from your undergraduate degree into the doctoral program in higher education, which is great if that's the path that you want to take. I found that typically master's programs are they require you to sort of piece together funding more so than doctoral programs might. So if you apply, a school may give you some financial aid. You may apply to like external scholarships or fellowships to help, but you won't sort of find schools just blanketly giving out, fully funded scholarships for master's program. Although it is a possibility. And on the doctoral side, so there's both an EDD and a PhD in most higher education programs, and the EDD is said to be more for practitioners who want to get a doctorate, and the PhD is focused more on going into faculty and really being like a research-heavy degree. Although both the PhD and EDD involve lots of research and things like that. I think you'll find more PhD programs are funded versus EDDs, but there are schools that fund their EDD students at a certain level versus PhD. And like at Penn and some other institutions, they really want to, if you apply for a PhD program, they really want to make sure that you're focused for that particular time period. And so you may not be able to hold outside employment during that period. And so a lot of times that's where you'll see funding accompany PhDs, whereas EDDs, especially like executive EDD programs, you can work while you're going through school. And so although you may be eligible for some financial aid, you may end up having to pay for some of those costs out of pocket, which may be a little bit more doable because you still hold and can hold employment. So I would love to hear Ed's perspective on this as well.
So I think Kendrick kind of summarized some of the traditional ways in which many students looking to have their master's and doctoral experiences supported or subsidized to some degree by the institution itself, and many different organizations have done so in the past. I would also add that in some cases, at many of the larger institutions and those that have very practitioner-based master's programs, you can also earn an assistantship, which is a part-time position in a functional area that the university has as or has in its operating structure to serve students. That may be an academic focused unit for example, student support services or a tutoring program, or in the provost's office working on establishing curricular outcomes, or setting up class-based kind of goals and classroom-based goals and objectives, or in a student affairs or co-curricular domain. So, for example, career services or um, uh, students financial aid or student support services, or athletics. And in these functional units, they may have part-time positions, 20 hours a week, that they look to secure grad students to work in, so that master's students and PhD students can get the opportunity to learn professional skills and competencies that they can perhaps build on, and once they finish their degree and then work at an institution. So, in that case, the university will typically give tuition support to some degree, if not full, and then offer a stipend, a living stipend for working in this capacity as a graduate assistant while also doing full-time either master's or doctoral level work. So in that way, I that was certainly my experience as a master's student, and it took, as Kendrick alludes, I'm now fully funded, but also have research type responsibilities to my advisor, as well as the center in which I work. Um, so, in that regards, it's a trade-off. You're not, receiving necessarily free money to do your coursework, but you are having it supported while you also develop some skills outside of the classroom and some experiences outside of the classroom that would help you advance in the workforce once you get on the market to either work, if you're look from a master's program to a doctoral program. Hopefully, yeah, you would have achieved some experiences that are make you attractive during the applications process.
Okay, so in addition to that, what are functional areas that a student can work in if they decide to go into the field? We touched on it a little bit earlier, but really, if a student is asking like specifically, what are some functional areas? What can I do? Where can I focus my energy? How would you all answer that question?
There's definitely a lot of different pathways that you could take with a higher education degree. Um, in terms of like a master's student, like getting a master's degree would be different, obviously, if you get a master's degree or a PhD. But in terms of the actual career options, you could be an admissions counselor. You could work with like campus life with students more directly if that's something that you would like to do. But then there's other options as well, like administration or being a faculty as well or a professor. And then you could also, in that area, you could conduct research or you could be a research analyst. There's really a lot of different options that you could take getting a degree in higher education, but it would definitely depend on like your interests and what you hope to accomplish after you're done with your master's degree or your PhD.
And could the folks on our panel talk a little bit about the different research foci or interests that are explored through the field of higher education?
So I think some of the different foci in higher education, does revolve around, students. A lot of the higher education literature and also research is focused on students and the various experiences students have while in college and how those experiences are, mitigated or influenced by their particular identities. So, one of my research interests is students of color, black students in higher education. So there are many different areas that one could focus. So on that end of the if we're looking at it as a spectrum, you may have students and their identities and how they experience in college. On another end of the spectrum, you may have an interest in how higher education is financed. So there are a lot of different areas that one could research or focus in higher education. Also, my colleagues, they are well versed in that too, so they could tell you more areas that a student or someone wanting to go into higher education could focus in.
I think there's a lot of different. It would almost be impossible to sort of sit here and sort of rattle off all of the different combinations and permutations of like research topics or even jobs and opportunities in higher education. And I think that's really a good thing because it means that the field is so broad, and the field has the capacity to accommodate students' interests, their backgrounds, their future aspirations. Like it's so broad, it has the capacity to sort of handle all of those different things. So you could work in student affairs, you could work in more academics, but to be honest, there are jobs in higher education that are not yet created that will be created by people who go into higher education and decide, hey, I'm going to write a grant from the NSF, or I'm going to write a grant from Department of Defense or National Institute of Health or the U.S. Department of Education, and I'm really going to ask them for funding to explore a topic that's really, really of deep interest to me. And a lot of people create their own positions at universities and create departments that were never in existence before. I mean, we're research associates in the Center for the Study of Race and Equity in Education, and that was the brainchild of Sean Harper. That wasn't something that existed at Penn before he created it. And so I would really encourage people to think outside the box and really look at what can I bring to higher education as opposed to how can I fit into the current higher education landscape.
And I would just add that in addition to a desire to understand student experiences in higher education or conditions under which students um, either make choices about or experience higher education, you could also bring to the field interests that maybe impact the environments that students experience, even if you're not necessarily interested in student related outcomes, right? So even if for example, you're interested in financing or underwriting the experience students have, perhaps you're interested in tuition differences, or financial aid packages or models of financial aid, and you have maybe an interest in understanding economic resources, that could be, there's a wide body of literature and questions for you to jump into, and advance what we know about what works for students with respect to financial resources. Or even if you're interested in how states fund, or the federal government funds this operation of higher education institutions, organizations outside of colleges and universities, etc. That could be an area in which you want to focus and do some research. So, you know, you may be interested in the contribution of college athletics to a particular school or even county or state. So, you know, even if you're not necessarily intrigued by, or maybe you just understand all you want to know about the experiential dimensions of higher education, there are many other dimensions that support the structure of higher education that don't necessarily have to do with student experience, but very much so support learning and development, which is at the core of, or should be at the core of, this operation of higher education. And I think, you know, if you know, a potential student or researcher could make a valuable contribution to that core objective of learning and development, even if they're not, you know, interested in the experiential dimension of higher education.
So it sounds like we've spoken a lot about how vast the field is. And one of the things I also wanted to reiterate to scholars is a lot of the work that we do with the Gates Millennium Scholarship Program, many of the folks that you all know in our office have degrees in the field of higher education. And so I want to also echo that, yes, you could work on a traditional college in a variety of capacities, but you could also work for a nonprofit like we do, or you may work with a government agency, the Department of Education, in a variety of roles as well. And so I think that the degree is definitely one. If you have an interest or you think you might be interested, definitely explore it. Definitely talk to some folks. If you're just a really awesome student leader and you love your, you know, being the president of your organization or just working on a college campus, that can be a career path that's very, very fulfilling. You can extend your college experience in a professional sense. And so keep those things in mind as well. One other thing that I wanted to pose to everyone on the panel, that I think is important for students to understand as they're considering the field, is what are the benefits? So we've talked about the research, we've talked about the different, whether it's a master's degree or PhD or what all you can do, or all these different opportunities, but what are the benefits of going into this field? And if you could speak maybe from your personal experience of benefits aside from whether that's financial or things of that nature, but how has this field and your opportunities benefited you, and what can students look forward to if they choose this field as far as personal benefits are concerned?
I guess I'll go ahead. For me, personally, I think the benefit for me is that I think the payoff really is really doing something that I enjoy. But you know, I think one of the benefits for me that I get to that just really resonates with me and kind of reminds me and um, keeps me committed to the work is that I, you know, get to help people that look like me and share similar experiences that I, as a person of color, experience. So I think for me that is really, really that my work is really meaningful, and even at times when I feel that, you know, man, like my work is insignificant, in very real ways, the things that I do in higher education does help people.
And for me, my ultimate goal is to continue and get a PhD and be a faculty. So for me, in terms of being a master's student in higher education, I feel like I have a lot of resources and opportunity to meet different people, talk to faculty that are already doing research in areas that I'm interested in, and see how I could be of make a contribution to the field, and also like and try to diversify academia, because there's not a lot of students of color or underserved populations that are in higher education, and I feel like I want to be a role model, someone that could encourage others to pursue their academic aspirations. And so I feel like getting a master's degree and then continuing to get a PhD would really allow me to accomplish those goals.
I guess I would just add the benefits have really come from my interactions with both students as well as um, a great kind of cadre of strong thinkers, leaders, servers, and doers. That both groups inspire me and challenge me um, to continue to evolve as a person, and to continue and evolve in, I guess, my professional domain. So I'm always fascinated by the experience students bring, the trials and tribulations that they've experienced, and their ability to, in spite of challenges and certain trials, overcome and reach their full potential in their personal and career aspirations. And I'm very inspired by the idea that I'm a part of that, and I contribute to that in some way. And I take from that things that I hope will help me advance my own evolution. Right. So if you're interested in being a part of something greater than one single objective, that to for example, make money or to produce product, then I think this, field can be very, very inspiring and can be very rewarding. Um, so I'll stop there.
I'll just add very quickly that for me personally, I think that the sort of benefit of higher education is really how it complements my previous work. So I mentioned before that my background was in engineering, and one of the sort of like resounding messages I would put out there is that you don't have to be in, you don't have to have done or have a background in like social sciences or humanities to go into higher education. And in fact, I would encourage those who have backgrounds who they may not traditionally think of applying to higher education to look into it, because you have a lot of, how do we increase, how do we increase the capacity of higher education institutions in STEM if we don't have people with STEM backgrounds going into those fields? How do we increase the capacity of higher education to be more like fiscally sound and come up with creative ways of financing if we don't have people in business that are going into higher education? How do we have I mean, it's just a whole slew of different backgrounds, and it's not for any particular background at all. It's just for anyone who is interested in, increasing access, increasing equity, and just increasing the field of higher education from various unique backgrounds. I think that's everybody.
All right. So, well, our time is drawing near, as we did get on late because Google Hangout, just we have a love-hate relationship, but it works. Really quickly, as we end our time together, on a note, I just want to say thank you all for participating in this panel and giving us this time, which I know is very valuable if folks are working or in school and things of that nature. So I just wanted to thank you all, and I'm sure that scholars appreciate it as well. And if anyone does not have any final thoughts, then that would conclude our panel, and I would like to say thank you, and I appreciate it. So GMS scholars, if you have questions, feel free to post on Twitter and in our Facebook groups. And if there are questions that we did not get to, we will be sure to make sure that those are answered as we continue on through the week. This video will be posted on our YouTube channel, Gates Millennium Scholars, and it will be on demand, so feel free to view it again if you would like, or if you know other scholars or friends that were not able to log in, then please be sure to send them over to the YouTube channel. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful night, and we appreciate your time.